Hey everybody, our topic for today is the Reconstruction of the South after the Civil War and the plans that are specifically put in place to bring all of those Confederate states back into the Union. Our essential questions for today: how is executive Reconstruction different from legislative Reconstruction? Think about the language there, executive branch being president, legislative branch being the Congress. And secondly, how did Reconstruction alter the U.S. Constitution? There are three main amendments that are going to be passed during this time period. And take a look at this social hierarchy here of the South. We have the aristocracy, those white, large plantation owners at the very top. The middle class, they have a few slaves, not a whole lot. They're the also white middle area. Below them are the poor whites, and these poor whites are those that have no slaves whatsoever. And then at the bottom, the largest percentage of the population in the South are the slaves: house servants, coachmen, field hands. You can see here why those aristocracy were so fearful of a slave revolt, because they're severely outnumbered by the slave population there. So how do we fix the South? The aristocracy is completely dead, and now we're going to have the passage of the 13th Amendment, which is going to outlaw slavery. And how is this free labor system going to work? It's going to be a big question for them in the South, because this is not anything that they are familiar with. And now what's going to happen with black people and white people coexisting? Are they able to go to the same places and intermingle with each other? The answer to that is absolutely not. 95% of these former slaves are absolutely illiterate. They can't read, they can't write, and it's part of the reason why they don't end up going anywhere out of the South after the Civil War. So the Freedmen's Bureau is going to provide the basic necessities for life. One of the big things that they're going to start is schooling, and we're going to see the first Reconstruction public schools there in the South. We're also going to see slaves sharecropping, and ultimately this is going to be just as bad as slavery was for those former slaves, because the landlords are going to just have these very one-sided contracts, and ultimately the fact that they're just having to pay out too much money in either leasing the land or in their payments to those landlords to make it even worthwhile. I mean, in that reading, it was, $5 or $10 per year? That's just not enough to live on, even for that time period. So Lincoln's plan for Reconstruction, he's absolutely fearful of external aggressions. External aggressions not from the Confederacy, but from foreign countries like Britain. This would be a prime example of when to invade the United States. So he wants to get the southern states back in as quickly as possible to become as strong as possible. So what he wants to do is unite everyone very quickly. He's not going to consult Congress because, again, he's kind of extending his power as president. And they really only had to do two things: accept the ban on slavery, that 13th Amendment, and 10% of their voters from 1860 had to take a loyalty oath. That was not a lot of people. Think about a normal standard class size of 40. That would only be 4 people that would be forcing changes there. And the result of this would be weak Southern governments. There's a few states that are going to move towards this, are going to jump at this really to get back into the Union. Unfortunately for Lincoln, he's going to be assassinated only a few days after the ending of the Civil War by John Wilkes Booth. So Lincoln, again, assassinated 6 days after the war, April 15th, 1865. He's going to Ford's Theater to take in a play, and former actor John Wilkes Booth is going to, in his box, and shoot him in the back of the head. He's going to blame Lincoln for destroying the Southern way of life. And this is going to lead us to Vice President Andrew Johnson taking over. Now, Andrew Johnson is a Southerner. He's from Tennessee, and he is really only on the ticket to balance out the North and the South Republicans, because at this point they needed the Republican Party needed support from Southern Republicans to make sure that Lincoln would win. Lincoln and Johnson really didn't even know each other that well, and they really weren't even political allies necessarily within the Republican Party. Johnson's plan, it really doesn't change very much from Lincoln's plan. It's really not that different. What he does want to do, however, is exclude the wealthy and the high-ranking Confederates from voting, because really what he wants to do is break the Southern planter class, those really large landowners, those guys that ran the South before. He doesn't believe that they should have the right to vote to make any kind of changes or become powerful again. However, him being from Tennessee, he is absolutely 100% racist. He firmly believes that white men alone must manage the South. That means by whatever necessary tactics to withhold those African Americans from the franchise or the vote. And a couple of ways that he's going to show his racist tendencies is by vetoing the expansion of the Freedmen's Bureau. Congress wants to expand those services to those former slaves. And they also want to get rid of these Southern black codes that are going to have developed after the ending of the Civil War, which is going to really restrict everything that these freed slaves are going to try to do. So Congress is trying to eliminate those, and ultimately Johnson is going to veto that. Moving forward, this is just going to be another reason why Congress is going to dislike the Republican Party. They've been taking a back seat ever since the beginning of the Civil War. So what they're going to do is override Johnson's vetoes. Johnson can check Congress by doing that, but also Congress can recheck the president by passing those same laws with a 2/3 vote. They're going to refuse to seat these new Southern governments that are going to come in under Johnson's plan, because they're ultimately just going to be a bunch of political cronies that are Johnson's friends leading these new states that are coming back in. And throughout this Reconstruction Act of 1867, this is where Congress is really going to put forth their power. They're going to reassert themselves to become that equal branch of government. They're going to divide the South into 5 military districts. Therefore, these new laws that are being put in place are going to be enforced. And the Southern states that want to come back into the Union have to ratify the 14th Amendment to come back in. They have to allow these slaves to have their citizenship and everything that affords them. Johnson is going to get this new law, this Reconstruction Act, and he's going to veto it. Ultimately, this is going to lead to his impeachment, and in 1867, it's only going to fail by 1 vote by the Senate. He will stay in office through 1868 when Ulysses S. Grant is elected president, and this is where Congress is really going to move forward with this Republican plan. So the 14th and 15th Amendment specifically, the 14th Amendment is going to guarantee citizenship to those born in the United States, with the exception of Native Americans, of course. And what it's going to say is state governments cannot deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without the due process of law. So you have to go to trial if you're going to take someone's property away. And also the 15th Amendment is the African American vote. Now keep in mind here, this is for men and men only. Women's groups are going to be completely outraged by this because they helped in this abolitionist movement and they want to be included. So we're still going to have to wait for approximately 50 more years before that's going to happen. The collapse of Reconstruction, we start to see the emergence of the KKK in 1866 and other vigilante groups. That's part of the problem. The real main problem is the support for the Republican Party is going to start to break down. There's going to be some bank failures in 1873 that are going to kind of cause people some concern. And think about when you have extra money, you're going to be more inclined to give that away to help people. If you are living paycheck to paycheck, you may not want to give that money away. You may not want to help someone else out. So once these bank failures hit, people are going to start to turn to look at what's best for them versus what's best for these former slaves. And this is really going to force Republicans to move away from Reconstruction altogether. And the way that these Democrats are going to take the South back is in 1876. This Tilden versus Hayes election. Tilden is a Democrat, Hayes a Republican. Tilden is actually going to win the popular vote. However, the presidency is not decided on the popular vote. He is 1 vote short of the electoral vote, 184 at this point. There are 20 votes that are in question, but Democrats will accept Rutherford B. Hayes as president if they get a few concessions from the Republican Party. The Southern states will accept Rutherford B. Hayes if the troops are withdrawn from those military districts, if there is a railroad built out west, and if Rutherford B. Hayes will appoint a Southerner to his cabinet, and ultimately it's going to be the Postmaster General position. Someone that is not necessarily of that much power, but at least for the Southerners it was good enough that they had someone in the cabinet to find out what was going on a daily basis. Ultimately, I would call this a 100% sellout. This is going to mark the ending of Reconstruction in 1877, and we really don't have any progress. It's going to take until 1954 before we start to revisit the issues of civil rights. And it's going to get kicked off with the Brown v. Board decision, and throughout the late 50s and really up until the late 60s, this is going to be a constant battle. But after this time period, it really gets put on the back burner, and no one really even talks about it anymore. And there's a lot of things that the Southerners are going to do to come back to what they call home rule, and it's really going to oust a lot of these African Americans who have made gains economically and politically and personally. And we're going to start to see them fall back down in a submissive role between them and the white people. And there's really no real progress except that 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, the outlawing of slavery, citizenship, and the right to vote. So let's recap this really quickly. How is the executive Reconstruction different from legislative Reconstruction? And how did Reconstruction alter the United States Constitution? So that's all I got. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. Let me know. Come by 3104 and I'd be happy to help. So I will see you next time. Thank you for watching.